welcome everyone to Vacuous Vocation. I have with me today a guest, Alex Voss. Alex and I are students here at the Ron Paul Scholar Seminar, Ron Paul Institute Scholar Seminar, and you and I are two of 10 students who applied for this program and got accepted. So that's how we're meeting, and we just finished today with the Scholar Seminar, listening to a day of talks, and then tomorrow, I believe you'll be there too, but the War on Us Ron Paul conference, and that will be excellent as well. But Alex, I wanted to initially invite you here and talk about Austrian economics, kind of like who you are, where you're from, what got you into Austrian economics.
Sure. Thanks for having me on the podcast, and happy to meet you. Happy to be here at the Ron Paul Symposium, as you mentioned. My background as it relates to Austrian economics actually started when I was in high school. I had a basketball coach. I played for a pretty good high school team and was fortunate enough to play in college, where I went to University of Chicago. When I had announced that I was going to University of Chicago, I had an assistant coach, start spending every day with me from then on out, basically telling me that the Chicago school is, a decent school of economics, but not really the right free market crowd to fall in line with. He at the time actually blogged as well under the title Austrian Economics Addict, and he would send me his posts once a week or so, largely from a Hayekian perspective. So I really took that background and followed his work, which led me essentially immediately to the Mises Institute, and probably from the time I was a senior in high school, really have been reading about every article that the Mises Institute has published, since that time. So maybe 12 years straight at this point, which has really only grown my interest in Austrian economics, and actually it's now culminated in attending the Mises Institute's master's degree program through the institute as well. So I've just started that in August, so just last month, 3 weeks in right now, getting started.
Dude, well, that's awesome, but congratulations on getting into that program. It's very prestigious.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't, I don't know for certain how difficult it is or is not, but I can tell you with the other classmates that I have in this cohort that I interact with are quite an interesting, diverse, and very strong economic backgrounds from all of them. So it's an impressive group.
Wow. And so you attended the University of Chicago?
I did, yeah. I attended from 2012 to 2016, played basketball there, and studied economics, finance, political science, all that.
That's really cool. Are you familiar with Curtis Yarvin?
I am, but only through other people. I don't read him myself, but I've heard him on podcasts, and I kind of know his general views.
There's one fact, or not a fact, but a point he makes in his blog, Unqualified Reservations, where he says there's roughly about 20 Keynesian economists for every Chicago school economist. And there's about 10 Chicago school economists for every one Austrian economist.
I don't think I've ever heard that point, but it doesn't surprise me. I think that might even be giving the benefit of the doubt to the Austrians in the Chicago school. Even the Chicago boys today are pretty much Keynesian. It's not the Milton Friedman days of University of Chicago of 50 years ago. It's changed.
Wow, dang, that's interesting. That's really cool. So reading all those articles on the Mises Institute, do you find yourself being more an anarchist, or where do you think along those lines?
Yeah, I would just say unequivocally, I'm an anarchist. Yes, I don't, more from a moral point of view than anything else. Especially since we heard today from Jacob Hornberger, I know he is very adamant that he doesn't think anarchy is the right solution. Um, I don't know if it is or is not, but I think if you're going to follow the Austrian economic analysis and the libertarian analysis, then if you follow it to its logical conclusion, I don't think there's room for the state. I don't think there's room for any intervention from any type of monopoly on violence. That said, I don't make it a point to quibble over. I would have absolutely no reason to fight with Jacob Hornberger over that view. We can both share our view because it's radically different than pretty much anything else you hear. So I don't find that a useful thing to fight over.
Definitely. Um, Myself, I identify as an anarchist as well, um, large in part due to the Mises Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I also want to discuss what you're currently working on, and you mentioned this in your introduction at the Ron Paul Institute Scholars Seminar. But why don't you explain exactly what it is you're currently working on?
Sure. I'm currently I've been doing it for about a year, but in a very serious capacity just since July, working with a group called Tipolis Corporation, Tipolis. And what Tipolis is it's the for-profit project arm of the Free Private Cities Foundation, which was founded by Titus Gebel and named after his book Free Private Cities. The idea of the foundation is really to promote the idea of building private cities, how we can make governance or the market for living together into a market instead of each individual geography has their monopoly use on force. Tipolis, on the other hand, is we work with the foundation. It's all headed by basically the same people, but we're really the project arm. So instead of idea promotion, we're actually trying to go out into the world and build private cities. It's a difficult task, no doubt. But typically, the idea is that we will go and negotiate with governments, typically ones that have more difficult balance sheets to handle. The governments that are known for corruption and haven't, created prosperity over time. So the United States is not who we're going to. They're not going to grant us the autonomy we want. We're going to lots of places in South and Latin America. We're going to Africa. We're going to Eastern Europe, places like that, and trying to negotiate with the government to essentially pass laws that will allow for what we call prosperity zones, which are similar to special economic zones but enhanced. So special economic zones are all over the world. There's thousands of them, maybe hundreds. I'm not entirely sure, but plenty. And what we're trying to do is take that to the next step. Really allow almost entirely internally to that city or to that prosperity zone to have the affairs of that zone be regulated internally. And those regulations would be done by a for-profit general service provider who essentially becomes the government. And the point of this general service provider is to make a profit. So they want to attract citizens. They want to provide good services for a cheap price, and then grow over time through attracting citizens and letting them basically have the freedom to do what they want. We think that this is likely to succeed because instead of having this the so-called social contract, what the case would be with a private city is there would be an explicit contract. The idea is we would build the city in vacant land, and if you want to move there, then you and the general service provider of this area would actually sign a contract that says you'll pay each year $1,000, something like that. And in return, the general service provider will provide you with basic infrastructure, protection, that type of thing. That's it. All else, you figure out on your own. There will be, a free market within the zone. So, healthcare services would be provided for, supermarkets, things like that. But it's not our responsibility as the government service provider. It's your job as citizen and entrepreneur to both live there and not violate anyone else's person or property, and then provide something of service, to other people, so that you can earn a living. And it doesn't have to be in the city, of course. It could be, any job you want to work, anywhere.
Even remotely.
Sure, absolutely.
That is fascinating. So there's many questions and ideas I have off of that. Um, there's an author I interviewed on my podcast. His name's Peter Voss. He wrote a book called The Road to Freedom, and he talks about, the subtitle is "In the Demise of Nation States," but he talks about this development of free trade cities. And one idea was that if a government goes bankrupt, they will have to sell off parcels of their land. And like you said, a state could be like a corporation over a geography. Where do you find? You mentioned where you find these lands, but is this kind of like what you're looking at? More governments that need to generate more revenue by selling off part of the monopoly of land ownership that they have, to you, and your company.
I think that might become increasingly what happens. Right now, what it is more countries that are desperate but not that desperate. Countries that want to attract foreign direct investment. They you may or may not know, China was one of the first countries to implement special economic zones, and they did it at the time, what was a town really of Shenzhen, really a fishing town, a fishing and farming town. And now it's become one of the largest metropolises in the world, all because that special economic zone essentially freed up from regulation, lowered tariffs, made taxes low, and this area has really prospered. So other countries have followed suit, and that's why we have hundreds or thousands of special economic zones everywhere, to the point where they're no longer a differentiator from the next country over. You can get a special economic zone in darn near every country in the world, I think, including the United States. So what our idea is okay, the special economic zones are no longer sufficient. What about going a little bit further even? What if we give even more autonomy to these, to the market, really, to garner foreign direct investment and grow, which inevitably will have spillover effects onto the local community. And so I think that's sort of the area that we've gone. The other area is just where we can get political support. It's not, as you can imagine, very common for politicians to say, "Sure, come take our land. We want to give up. We want to give up our sovereignty." That doesn't happen very often. In fact, in many ways, the only place that it has happened for sure is Honduras right now. We are in talks with other countries. We think there's reason to believe there will be more in the future. But about the only place that something like this or something approximating this exists is actually in Honduras right now.
So Honduras is a prospect. Do you have very developed free trade cities?
Not fully developed, I would say, in development, yes. So we are, you may or may not have heard of Honduras Prospera. They're on the island of Roatan, which is in the northern Bay Islands of Honduras. Prospera is a small little area that was bought by really a bunch of libertarian entrepreneurs in order to build what I would call a free private city, what is technically in Honduras called a ZA, a zone for economic development and employment. This ZA law was passed, and the Constitution of Honduras was actually changed a number of years ago, really through somewhat fortunate circumstances surrounding a boycott of the election. It just so happened to get enough of the Nationalist Party in so you could actually change the Constitution, which seems highly unlikely to ever be changed again. So we sort of have to live with what the law is now. It's a little bit messy, but can't change it. It's not going to get changed. So what we have now is the ZA law, which allows, within some constraints that are probably too intricate to get into right now, and I would have to go back and look through exactly how it all can work. But if you jump through a couple loopholes, um, property owners of a given size can essentially declare themselves to become ZAs. And as long as they can fulfill a couple of things like the guarantee of personal protection, then essentially there's no reason they cannot become ZAs. So these are increasingly popping up. There are currently 3 of them in Honduras. I think there's probably reason to believe there might be 5 or more, even by the end of the year. They're coming pretty quick, and all of them are rather fledgling in their development. So Honduras Prospero was really the first one. There's another one near the town of Choloma on the mainland of Honduras called Ciudad Morazon. And there's another one in the south of the country that myself and my company were somewhat less familiar with. And it seems to be more or less one company that sort of declared themselves to become a ZA more out of tax reasons and regulation reasons than building a city to become, a different model for the future.
And I want to ask, because you and I are students of economics, the prospect of new forms of currency and money in these free trade cities. Do you think Bitcoin is a prospect to look at as far as like these developing cities with adopting new currencies? What do you think about that?
The short answer is yes. We accept investment in cryptocurrencies, largely Bitcoin. There's differing views within the company about what cryptocurrency is the right one. But I think, certainly we're rather open-minded about what the currency of these cities will be. In terms of what you might call taxes or the fee that we would charge as the government service provider, we'll have to make the cutoff at some point. We'll accept, A, B, and C currencies. My guess is those will be US dollars, euros, Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, maybe Bitcoin Cash. I'm not sure exactly where we will make that cutoff, and it's sort of a decision that we'll figure out when we get there. But yeah, we absolutely think that those are the future. We absolutely will have a free market in it. We're not going to, just because we accept payment in those, 3, 5, whatever currencies, doesn't mean we have any regulations necessarily within the city about what you can and can't use. If someone wants to only accept Bitcoin, by all means, go ahead and do that. You just got to attract customers that want to pay you in Bitcoin. So we're a total free market in currency. We don't want to plan it. And I do personally think that Bitcoin is the future.
Great. What is your, philosophical outlook for the direction or ideal destination of the development of these free trade cities? Do you see this as being the demise of the nation states?
Yeah, I don't. That's a tricky question. I don't know. I think it's a little too early, and it might be a little bit too premature to claim that it would be the downfall of any nation state necessarily. I don't even think that we purport to want to necessarily do that. What we want to do is we want to provide an alternative for people that want to live in not under authoritarian rule, not under lockdowns that can arbitrarily be enforced, not at the whim of a forced vaccination, that can live their lives like normal people that want to live normal lives. They want to raise their kids. They want to go to church. They want to go out on the weekend, whatever it is that they want to do that normal people do. We want people to do that. If people want to stay in, the U.S. or Canada or wherever they want to stay, that's fine. We're not trying to necessarily make everyone in the world a libertarian. I think that's increasingly clear that we cannot do that. There are people that don't agree with us. They don't agree with us very strongly, and there will be no, even if you can have a respectful discussion with them, which is increasingly difficult, you're still not going to change anyone's mind. Um, and that's fine. They don't need to change their mind. If they'd like to live, the way things are going now, that's fine. I just don't. So I don't know that we're trying to be the downfall. We're just trying to provide a place of security and regular life for people that would like it.
Great response. Do you see yourself moving out of the United States?
Um, in the short run, no. In the long run, yes. Um, Although I'll hedge my bets on both. As of now, things in the U.S. are okay. There's no free private city that's far enough along where I would be comfortable moving. That said, if one develops very quickly and becomes something I'm comfortable with and stable, and then yeah, I would absolutely move. In the long run, I do think things in the U.S. are going to get pretty messy. So I think I'll be forced to move, quite frankly. I don't know exactly where. It's not like there are, bunches of options for people with my type of views. So we'll see. In the long run, I imagine that the United States is not going to be my home. I just don't see how anything here turns around for the positive quick enough. I think we're going to have to go through some hard times before anything gets better.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. It's difficult for people to want to move out of where they live. That's very strenuous, and yeah, some people don't want to do that.
Well, I think that's absolutely true. It's one of the challenges we face. It's also one of the reasons why we'd love to build a free private city in the U.S., for example. I just don't know that that's likely to happen. I would hope through increasing polarization, some state, in particular from the left point of view, California seems to come to mind, or New York, or from the right point of view, Florida comes to mind. If they would be willing to really stand up and talk seriously about some sort of secession and living in different environments. Look, Florida does not have to be ruled the same way as New York City. It just doesn't. If that happens, then certainly we would look at opportunities to, carve out a portion of, Florida, or even, any other state to build a free private city, which would still be within what people think of today as the United States. I just don't know that it's terribly likely to happen. I can't. The arrogance from politicians in the U.S. seems unlikely to be willing to even sit at a table and discuss why this would be a potential benefit.
Hmm. So you're, I can assume, very much in favor of national divorce, separation, localization.
I am. I've been totally convinced, really, by Jeff Deist. I would say I don't. I just increasingly think he's right that there's no point in fighting. Um, the only way that this is going to simmer down is to separate. So I don't. It's not that I want to see the United States broken up. Um, but I just don't see another way. I think it makes more sense for Florida to be Florida, New York to be New York, Illinois to be Illinois, and even within that, Chicago to be Chicago, and the rest of Illinois to be something else.
Mhm. I almost think that it's a boomer ideology that we need the states to be united. What does the flag even represent anymore? It's a symbol. I like as Michael Malice says, I love this country. Maybe not him. There's a quote that says like I love the country but hate the government.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's what is the country anymore? I mean, I care more about people than I do a geographical uh, designated area. If people aren't happy in this relationship, then it's definitely time to separate. And what do you think that looks like?
I don't know what that looks like. I think it's messy. I would agree with your sentiment that it just is foreign to me why we can't get more people to realize that a divorce amongst the states is the right move forward. I just, it's constant bickering from left and right. The Democrats do this. Joe Biden got these 13 people murdered in the Kabul airport. The Republicans, want women to be forced to raise children until they're 18. Whatever the argument is, increasingly they just don't see eye to eye, and yet the idea of a national divorce seems to frighten them more than anything. And I do not know. I honestly am at a loss for why that is. Maybe it is, like you said, a boomer type of thing. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But I can say honestly, I've never quite understood it. I've never felt it. I have, I guess, America pride to an extent, but not past the point of the fact that we can no longer get along. And if you can no longer get along, then what is the point of this in the first place? As for how a divorce would look, I can't say. I've heard Tom Woods and Brian McClanahan talk about this a little bit. I think it's very tricky. What happens to U.S. federal government bases in Texas if we have a Texit? I don't know, but I have to imagine that all of this could be figured out through, if you had rational heads talking about, okay, we have this of your property, you have that of our property. It makes more sense to have everything that's within, the geographic boundaries of Texas, and to sell everything else back. I think you can get to some sort of, it's not really a market since it would still be governments making this, but some sort of market response. But it would be ugly. And I think that's partly what frightens people from going down this conversation, is the fact that no matter how you do it, there's a lot of entangling webs, and it's going to be tricky, and you're just going to have to, work through it line by line, and just, it's got to be done.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the answers we don't have. Is what does it look like to separate?
So it's sort of our ideology, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how the market in a new free private city is going to look. That's sort of the point. We want to set the foundation of let people. I think people make pretty good decisions when they're free to make decisions, and I don't like coercion. Otherwise, I sort of just want to let people do as they may, and how that looks, we're going to find out.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That the beautiful thing of knowledge and specialization in trade, and having inventions being discovered not by the planners but by people.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to that idea of nationalism and having a United States rather than a to use the left's term, a diversity of states. Yeah, maybe it's definitely not just a boomer thing, but it's almost something we take for granted or have been indoctrinated into believing that the states are just as a given united, and necessarily so. So I think, maybe in the upcoming generations, more cynical views about what schooling is, or the ideas may change. People may be able to see, not from like a libertarian perspective, but from practical perspective, that like, fuck these people in the other state. Let's just separate from them, and
Mm-hmm.
like, we don't need to associate with them.
Seems to me that's one of the few and only silver linings from this whole COVID lockdown fiasco, is people in Florida are proud to be in Florida. People in New York, if you're proud to be in New York, then you're one type of person that tells me essentially everything I need to know about your politics. And the people that were in New York that have now fled to Florida are now proud to be in the free state of Florida. And I think that this is unequivocally a good thing for people to think of themselves as Floridians, New Yorkers, Texans. That's the only way that this improves over time. If you just think of yourself as an American, I mean, it's over and over again, just repeated to you. That's going to build up that national pride. And I think the more and more we can build up state pride and city pride, and then even more local beyond that, the better. But But getting down to the state level is really the first major goal. At least becoming, I mean, the states are, many of them are about the size of the states over in Europe. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that Florida couldn't be its own country. I mean, it's got, I don't know, 35, 40 million, 50 million people there. That's about as big as, many of the countries in Europe. And they're all, have borders right next to each other. There's no reason there has to be just one country over this massive landmass covering mountains and two oceans and major rivers and all those types of things. There's just no reason that it all has to be under one rule.
A very interesting point my older brother mentioned to me was some states want to be associated with California, for example, because of the tech industry. They have such a strong, I guess, GDP that some of these other, destitute states are like, no, we need to be together because we want this economic powerhouse. Do you think that maybe we don't break along state barriers or boundaries, and I don't know, maybe there's even more of a disintegration within the states, possibly? It's just thinking like maybe we bypass the state secession level and somehow go into like a county level.
It seems to me that is possible. I guess what immediately comes to mind is the fact that on the one hand, it seems likely that you can garner support amongst the county to do something like this easier than you can across a whole state. I think it's already happened in a number of places. I think there's some counties in Western Virginia that want to become part of West Virginia. I think there are some in maybe Oregon that want to become part of Idaho. So I do think in that sense that it is absolutely more possible from a practical level. On the other hand, from a practical level, there's a legal process for this at the state level. The states make up the federal government. The counties and the local governments do not make up the states. Those are really national. From the state perspective, those states, they formulate the national government, so they are prior to the national government. Therefore, they could easily separate. Certainly, it's complicated. We've gone through a civil war. Civil war is a bad term for it, since they're not fighting over the same government. So there's hair on it with that, but it matter-of-factly plainly says in the Constitution that the states can, in fact, secede. They make up the federal government. The counties, that is not the same way. So it is easier to garner support, but it's not like there is a prior thought-through way to disintegrate at that level. So it would necessarily have more complications, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, this could happen in a million different ways. Great. Let's see. Is there anything on your mind that sticks out? I know I'm making this very like question oriented, but it is a podcast, and I want to keep it like a casual conversation.
Sure.
On intense political philosophy and economics and such.
Well, maybe you've already gotten into it on your previous podcast, but I'd love to hear about what you're getting ready to do in terms of studying Austrian economics over in Spain.
I am so excited. So I am going to study at the Universidad de Rey Juan Carlos in Madrid, Spain, under a couple professors, but specifically Professor Jesus Huerta de Soto, who's a legend in the field of economic theory of the Austrian school. And I'm actually leaving this Sunday from DC to cut down on travel time. But that's that. I mean, dude, I'm looking forward to that. In college, I went to Occidental College,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a professor there, Professor Jurgen, who offered a course called Free Market Economics: The Austrian Perspective. And I played baseball, and going into college, I was like a libertarian. Some of the older baseball players was like, dude, you got to meet this professor. He's a libertarian. So I met him, and I was lucky enough to take a course with him, be his TA. I took 5 courses with him in college, and he was like, he's my mentor. But he helped me go to the Mises University in 2018. Did you attend that?
I've never done it, no.
What about the Rothbard graduate? So,
I've never done it, but that is part of the
oh,
curriculum
that
for the
is.
master's degree.
Would you be doing that next summer?
It'll be next summer. Yeah,
I'm
it's
in.
like the eighth. So the our program is 10 segments long, and it's like the eighth one. So
Okay. If you do that next summer, I'm trying to do that one too.
okay, then
So
there's a decent chance that we'll be in the same
yeah,
one.
that would
Yeah,
be awesome.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that would be so sweet. But the Mises University was great. I met two people there in particular, um, Alan Wheeler and Alex Lewis, and they recommended, they introduced me to De Soto's program in Spain, and they're like, dude, if you want to study Austrian economics and a master's degree, go to this one. And so it's been like a goal of mine to do this for the last couple of years. Um, I I went to a Mises conference in 2019 back in November in Los Angeles, where they announced, I think Lou Rockwell announced, they're offering the master's program in Austrian economics with the Mises Institute. And I was like, damn, that's awesome. Um, I, I attempted to apply for the first cohort, but I was a day late because I had to take the GRE, and I got my test results the day after the applications were due. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get it, but that's all right. I'm very excited for Spain and to just become a just totally immersed and immersed into both Spain and Austrian economics.
Mm-hmm. How long is the program?
The master's is 1 year, and then there's a follow up PhD program that's 2 years long. But I don't know if the PhD program is something to do from home or like you have to be there in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So
And is it a like a full time program? So the Mises one is not really full time necessarily. It's very independent study. So I'm still working, as you know, and doing it on the side. I assume yours is going to be full time, or
yeah, this one is full time. I'm very curious about the Mises master's program.
mm-hmm.
Is it like what would that? How many hours of course load is that a week?
um, so it's structured, and I'm only in my first class, so I can't really speak to anything beyond this one. So right now, just microeconomics. It is 8 weeks long. Each week, roughly, we have an hour or 2 hour long lectures, pre-recorded lectures from somewhere on the Mises site at some point in the past, typically, and then 5 to 8 readings, which probably sums up to maybe 150 pages of text per week. And then you will write a discussion post on that topic, about 500 words, and respond to at least of your two of your classmates' posts as well. So it's largely self-learning. You watch the lectures, you read the books, and you try to think about and write, um, and just kind of think about this stuff on your own time. I would say so. The time constraint is basically how much you want to put into it. That said, because it's a highly selective group of people, your average person is not getting a master's in Austrian economics from the Mises Institute. Um, it's a lot of people that are very dedicated to this and very interested in this, already have a strong background in this. So the amount of time I'm putting into it is reasonably significant. I have a master's degree from Notre Dame in finance, and I can tell you confidently that the Mises Institute I'm finding much more difficult, and that's not to speak bad on Notre Dame at all. It's way more intellectually stimulating for me. The finance is what I got my master's degree at Notre Dame. It's very much solve the calculations, and I knew how to do much of that. So that's one thing, but it's just thinking through a praxeological argument is something that necessarily entails very critical thinking over time, and just very rigorous reading and things like that. So I'm finding it fascinating, very stimulating, and harder is not the right term, but more effort required than I maybe expected.
Hmm.
In a good way,
Yeah,
genuinely in a good way.
that's that's fascinating. So how are the readings that you're doing? Like, what are the main sources? of those?
Yeah, the main sources are the main texts, the treatises of Austrian economics. So we've already delved into man, economy, and state, human action, bureaucracy, things like that. There's a few others by some other authors that are a little bit newer that try to make it in a little bit simpler terms, but we're certainly delving right into the behemoths and those large treatises that are the
Yeah,
foundation.
that's really cool, man. In college, in undergrad, my professor was like, "Dude, let's read Human Action." Took us 2 years to finish.
Yep.
He finished a couple months or weeks before me, but I'm like, the fact that you guys are just reading those is like, dude, that is the best master's program
Yep.
probably in the world.
Yep. Well, and it's super. I bought both of those books, Man, Economy, and State, and Human Action, a couple years ago, wanting to read them, and for one reason or another, did not. What's nice about this program is it's another kick in the rear end to do it, and also it comes with just a modicum of instruction of professor instruction. Like, why don't you read these 30 pages this week that cover this topic, and then I want you to write a post on it and reflect on it, and then we'll go to those 80 pages. And so it's instead of just starting at page one and reading through, which can be helpful, but for me this is the right mix of okay, you read these 30 pages, you read chapters 1 and 2, what does it mean? And so you really dig in and digest that, and then it's like, all right, now chapters 11 through 15, what does that mean? And how do they fit together? So it's just the right mix of do it on your own, but also within some structure, like just a little bit of structure to make sure you're pointed in the right direction.
That's fucking awesome.
It's great. I'm loving it so far.
That's so cool.
Well, you should do it sometime. You could do it in a couple years.
We'll see how this master's program goes, but definitely the Rothbard graduate
Yep.
program. Have you guys finished Human Action and Man Economy?
No.
No, it's just
No,
you're
no,
going
no.
through it.
Yep, we're going through it, and I don't know that we will technically finish the whole book. We're reading 200 pages a week of 3 to 4 different texts, so we're not going to finish the whole book.
Yeah.
But I imagine throughout this course and future courses within the program, I'll get through most of it. I'm not sure that I will be able to say I read it, front to back, but very familiar with the text. Certainly by the time I'm finished.
That's so dope. This is great. We can keep going. But I want to grab some dinner if you're available, and maybe a beer.
Sure,
Um,
that'd be great.
Anything else that you want to discuss on the podcast?
No, I think that's it for me.
Any shout outs?
No specific shout outs. If you're interested in any of the Tipolis work that I've described, go to Free Private Cities Foundation, freeprivatecities.com, which is the website for the foundation. And then if you're interested in the project company, go to tipolis.com. And you can find my contact information there, my bio, and read a little bit more about us. And if you have any questions, comments, ideas, then certainly feel free to reach out to me. We're always looking for new projects we could potentially take on.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much.